It was drawn to it for a reason. I didn't want to go any closer. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to run, to get as far away from this thing as possible, but my legs were like stone. Every instinct I had was telling me that this wasn't a part of the forest that could be escaped. I wasn't dealing with the missing factor or something else. No, this was something ancient, something older than the park itself. Something that fed on fear, that thrived in the dark. Help! I yelled, though the word tasted like ash. Is anyone out there? Please, help me. But my voice was swallowed up by the void, by the dense silence of the woods. No response.
Yo, friendly.
The air around me seemed to warp, distort.
You good, Chief? Just passing through, brother.
The ground beneath me seemed to sink, like the earth was pulling at me, pulling me towards something deeper, something darker. I tried to take a step back, but my foot slipped, my balance faltering as I tumbled to the ground. I hit the dirt hard, the shock of the fall making my head spin. I scrambled to my feet, wiping the dirt from my face. When I looked up, the figure was gone. I didn't know what to feel. Relief, terror, confusion. The only thing I knew for certain was that it had left, but it hadn't gone far. I could still feel its presence, pressing on me, like a storm of fire, too far away to see, close enough to feel it every nerve. There was a rustle behind me. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. But it wasn't the figure. It was the man. The hiker, the one I had been trying to meet. He stood a few feet away, his eyes wide, his face pale with fear. He was trembling, his body swaying slightly, like he was barely holding himself together. Run, he whispered, his voice hoarse and broken. You have to run. It's not safe here. It never was. I opened my mouth and asked what the hell was going on. Before I could speak, he stepped forward. Slowly, deliberately, taking his right in front of me. His hand shot out, gripping my arm so tightly it felt like his fingers were gripping me. I felt it flew away, but his grip was iron-clad. His eyes locked on me. I saw something I knew, something followed. His pupils were dilate, his face twisted and clear, his left the clear. There was fear of life in me. Don't turn around, he whispered to me. Don't look, just run. But it was too late. I heard the low growl before I thought it. It wasn't an animal's growl. It was something worse, something that rattled the very air around me. It came from behind me, from the heart of the woods. As I turned my head, I saw it. The trees were moving, not swinging. No, the trunks were shifting, bending toward me. Branches twisted like yellow fingers, reaching out, their tips brushing against the air as if seeking something to grab onto. And in the center of the twisted trees, there was a shape. A massive, open figure. More shadow inside. Moving just beyond the reach of the flashlight beam. It was the thing from before. The one that had been waiting, before I could even react to the man. No, the thing that had once been a man. Let out a scream. It was a sound like nothing I'd ever heard before, a scream of pure terror that went through the air with a sharpness that made my blood run cold. And then he was gone. The forest fell silent. The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was the absence of anything. The woods, which had once been alive with the sounds of rustling leaves, distant bird calls, and occasional steps and whips, were now deafeningly quiet. My own heartbeat echoed in my ears, pounding in time with the frantic rhythm of my thoughts. I stood there, frozen, staring at the spot where the man had been, trying to process what had just happened. Had he disappeared into the trees? Had he been taken? My stomach churned as the weight of what I had just witnessed settled over me. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. I was a park ranger, for God's sake. I'd seen my share of weird things out in the wilderness, but this was something else entirely. Something beyond comprehension. There was no denying what had happened. The man had screamed, a sound that had been full of raw, primal fear and medicine. He was gone. No sign of struggle. No blood. Just the unnatural stillness of the forest closing in around him. I turned slowly, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, my breath shallow and quick. I had to get out. I had to get back to the trail, back to something familiar, something that made sense. But every direction I looked, the woods seemed to stretch forever. There was no clear path, no sign of the trailhead, and I felt it. The pressure, the suffocating weight of the air pressing on me, growing bigger by the second. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I turned, just in time to see the trees shift, their trunks groaning under some unseen. The woods, the one I had seen before, was back. It was closer now, and it was closer. Shadows that had at least been visible dark and oppressive. The figure was no longer a shape in the trees. It was solid, present mind. It was the thing that had been drawing me in, the thing that had been waiting for me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But my legs wouldn't move. It was as if the forest had ensnared me, its roots, its branches, its very air, wrapping around me, holding me in place. And then it spoke. The voice was deep, resonant, like the rumble of thunder in the distance. But there was no mistaking the command in its tone. You are mine now. I couldn't breathe. The words were not spoken aloud, but they vibrated through me, inside me, as if they had been planted in my very bones. My stomach twisted, and I fought the rising panic that threatened to take control. My eyes scanned the dark woods desperately, looking for any escape, but there was none. It was all closing in. I stumbled backward, the flashlight flickering in my hand, casting a red shadow that made the trees look even more monstrous. There was a flicker of movement to my right, just out of the corner of my eye. I looked around. There was nothing there, except for the sound. The whispering. Come closer. Come closer. And my eyes darted through the trees. I couldn't keep running blindly. I had to find something infinite I could experience. But as I looked deeper into the woods, my flashlight beam caught on something strange. Something that shouldn't have been there. The clearing. The one the man had mentioned earlier. The one he had warned me about. It wasn't a part of the forest I recognized, but it was there now, standing before me like an open wound in the earth. The trees around it twisted unnaturally, forming a perfect circle, their branches interlaced in a web of dark shadows. The air in the clearing was thicker than the rest of the forest, as if it was alive, breathing. And in the center of the clearing, nothing. No sign of the man. No trace of his footsteps. Just an empty space, waiting. You are here, the voice echoed in my mind. This is where you belong. I wanted to scream. I wanted to fight, to run, to tear my way out of the woods. But there was nothing I could do. The forest had me. The thing that was waiting for me. It had me now, and there was no escaping. I stepped forward, my legs moving against my will,
Your wrist hurts,
my
man?
body moving of its own accord. The whispering grew louder, the chanting, the hum, wrapping around me like chains. I wanted to fight it. I wanted to scream. But my mouth wouldn't open. My body wouldn't respond. And then, as I crossed the threshold of the clearing, everything went black. Days later, I was found. My body was contorted, twisted and raised.
Head home at the central
body
swampland.
had ever been. My limbs locked in unnatural angles. My face was frozen in a mask of terror, eyes wide, staring into nothing. My hands were stretched out before me, fingers gnarled and broken. There were no signs of struggle, no tracks, no signs of anyone having followed me. But when they found me, when the search team found me, they knew where I'd gone. They knew where Missy had gone. And they knew where the hiker's footsteps had led, into the clearing, the one that had been waiting. I decided that I would share some of my grandfather's stories. He told me about his time working with a forester in Michigan to manage the National Forest. He never got a chance to write any of his experiences down, so I thought I might
An
post them
orbiter is en route. The safe window is closing. You have 10 minutes to return to Speranza. I repeat, 10 minutes.
Before then, he had been drifting around the region, doing odd jobs and logging until he was hired by the Forest Service in the northwest part of Michigan's Lower Peninsula. The work, as I understand, was slow, and most days he and his crew were sent to different parts of the forest to address various tree and land concerns. Grandpa was always an avid outdoorsman, and he enjoyed hunting and fishing just about as much as anyone in the region. Sadly, he died in December of 1998, when I was still rather young. But I remember whenever we went to visit him and Grandma, he would sit my brother and me down and tell us about his days in the Forest Service. Working outside every day allowed him to witness all sorts of wildlife, like black bears, white-tailed foxes, and even bobcats. He often relived his encounters with bears while he was deep in the forest, telling us that those moments were some of the most memorable of his life, being up close to such beautiful and powerful animals. Usually, his tales were exciting, and the enthusiasm with which he told them inspired us to go out to the backyard and look for animals in the cabin. Although there wasn't much wildlife around Grandpa's property, he still always kept a close eye on us, and never let us wander too far from the house. Finally, 2 years before his death, Grandpa deemed my brother unusual enough to be told off. My brother was going to have and on about the peace that the wilderness October had rolled in a autumn breeze, and the sound of the Canada breeze flying southward. The first of his strange stories seemed to be in his crew that spent the last quarter after it. There was a wind no moon or stars could see the 6 clouds so the only illumination I could reckon he must have been going close to 50 miles per hour at the very moment when something huge leaped across the road on 20-foot ahead. His headlights had shown the heaven's silhouette. It was dog-shaped, massive, and stretching all the way across the road. It only made one at the time, it was the second of his stories would be frightening outside. Even now, I'm afraid because it's in dark because of the obvious fear of Grandpa's Grandpa's house was really small. It was filled with lots none of his neighbors tended to stay up very late, so it surprised him to be awakened by loud noises. It sounded like scratching on sheet metal, with occasional thumps and bumps like an animal was moving. Grandpa apparently got up, fetched a flashlight, put on his boots, and went out into the front room, the walls of which consisted of mosquito screens stretched between wooden framework. Once in the front room, Grandpa could hear the sound very clearly, and they were coming from the nearest of his neighbor's home, maybe 50 or 60 feet. It was incredibly dark that day, with no streetlights to illuminate. The neighbors passed far away from the but Grandpa couldn't make out what was creating the racket through the screen, so he slowly opened the front door and looked out. He described to us in the they always spent the Two massive dogs covered in white blood were up against his neighbor's house, scratching and silent. His webbing swine. Each species might be 7 feet tall, with their front legs stretching for another 2 or 3 feet until reaching the roof and covering the house. Their scratching, though.
All Raiders, arc on screen. 5 minutes left. Go find your way home. I repeat, 5 minutes.
The next part was actually the hardest to get out of Britain. It was strange that he was so eager to tell us everything thus far, despite how little he was. He was rather hesitant to tell me any details of his encounter. He claims that the animals then noticed the movement of rich music in the house, just as was thought. It usually turned towards straight, and just pushed forward. They appeared to be as everybody's, huge bodies that were large black bears inside. They also supported themselves not with 4 legs, like any other native mammal, but instead they stood on 2 legs each, towering 7 feet above the ground. The sounds that they proceeded to make, Grandpa had said, would haunt his dreams for the rest of his life. It was a shame that the animals couldn't more accurately mimic the unwolf-like screams the animals made, for that detail always fascinated me the most about the story. They didn't sound like foxes, coyotes, or bobcats. Instead, they forced half-scream, half-howls out of their jaws that Grandpa would sure bite the teeth of a carnivore. Grandpa never told us exactly what happened next. I guess we assumed that he ran inside, locked the doors, and didn't look outside until morning. He would tell us that 4 of his neighbors, including the elderly couple that lived in the nearest house,
Yes?
didn't stick around very long.
Thank goodness. You found
He
them.
did say that he tried to talk to them about what had happened.
Guess what? Shadi, here's a list of buildings that could make
Never
for
gave
potential
any straight
outposts.
answers.
Mark them with
That
paint
turned
for
out
us,
to be
so
somewhat
the crews know
ironic
where to
because
go.
Grandpa himself kept tight-lipped about many of the details of his stories. He would say that he heard those exact screams on 2 other occasions, both times while he was in the Manistee Forest, and he showed us an old Forest Service report detailing a possible timber wolf sighting in the area, complete with photographs of huge, padded paw prints in mud. The thing is, Grandpa never told any of the stories, but his most trusted family, which is unique among Michigan dogman witnesses. After the craze that Steve Cook's Legends song stirred in the 80s, it's no wonder that so many stories from the region surfaced. I had heard a few bits and pieces about the so-called monster before Grandpa told his tale, but it wasn't until later in life that I realized his encounters had to have been with the same creature. Whether I believe him that massive wolves walk upright through Michigan forests, well, I'm still not so sure. But as a modern zoological curiosity, the stories of strange beasts from a passionate woodsman who knew his wildlife certainly remain among the most remarkable I've heard, simply because of the genuine emotion with which he related his tales. Legends like these might just be figments of our collective imagination, so all I can do is present what I've heard and let others judge for themselves what is real and what is pure fiction. Anyway, as the song goes, don't go out at night. I am currently on a solo journey around the United States, and while in Northern California, I experienced 2 separate encounters on 2 consecutive nights in entirely different areas. The first night was in Jedediah Smith State Park, down South Fork Road, at an old rock quarry used as a dispersed site. I arrived around 4:30 p.m., set up my tent, let the dogs roam off leash, and started making dinner. As I sat down to relax, I heard a strange humming sound. Very low, so deep I could hear the sound reverberating off the quarry walls. A short while later, I heard howling in the distance. Unsure of its origin or distance, I decided to turn in for the night and climbed into the tent. Once inside, I turned on an audiobook and settled the dogs down. As I started to doze off, I heard something rather large moving through the brush across the river. The dogs were on edge and growling towards the sound, which is unusual for them. Typically, they are inquisitive, but well-behaved regardless of the animal. To keep things calm, I decided to sleep in the car. As soon as the car door shut, a rock hit my front, followed by 5 more in the next 2 minutes, one of which chipped my windshield. I boogied out of there and spent the night in the Walmart parking lot in Crescent City. On the second night in Northern California, I made my way through the redwoods to Eureka. I stopped at the BLM office in Arcata to ask about any good dispersed sites, and they gave me a few suggestions. I took off down Highway 299 towards Willow Creek. All 3 sites the BLM office suggested were closed due to some tree fungus they were trying to contain, so I stopped at the Forest Service office in Willow Creek to see if they knew of anything. The woman there was very nice. We talked about my encounter the night before, and she said, "You will likely see or hear something out here. but we rarely hear about creepy encounters like yours last night. With a new outlook on the evening, I drove out to Horse Linto Campground near Willow Creek, and it was absolutely the most beautiful place I had been so far. I arrived at the site around 2:30 p.m. I was the only one in the campground, so I picked the best spot, played with the dogs, and got everything set up. I didn't have any uneasy feelings, and the dogs were blissfully unaware of anything in the surrounding woods. It was a very pleasant afternoon. A man in a pickup truck with a dog arrived around 6 p.m. He asked if I was solo, and if the dogs were nice. I lied and said my husband was sleeping in the tent. I always bring an extra chair and men's boots to leave outside the tent, but the dogs are nice. He picked a site and started setting up, then walked around the truck and asked if this place gave me the heebie-jeebies. I said no, and he said he was leaving. He packed up and left. About 45 minutes later, as the sun was setting, I got up from my chair and walked to the riverbank. As I looked up and examined the flowers, my eyes locked with a very large bipedal creature on the opposite bank. My blood turned to ice as the creature peered into my soul. Our eyes stayed locked for about 10 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I turned to run for the dogs, and as I glanced back, it was gone. I ushered the dogs into the car, ripped my tent off the stakes, stuffed it on top of the dogs, and tore down the mountain back into Willow Creek. The weirdest part of the entire experience was that while our eyes were locked, the creature spoke to me in my head. In the deepest voice it said, "Should you choose to stay here tonight, you are in imminent danger." As its voice echoed in my skull, I saw an image of myself running through the forest in the dark. I have aphantasia, so I have never had imagery in my head. My dreams and imaginings are always black, so this really freaked me out. However, I do not feel like the creature was the danger it spoke of. Rather, it seemed to be protecting me from some other danger. I have since continued my solo trek. While the experience scared me to my core, I am grateful for it and will continue my love for outdoor adventures. I've told this story to friends and family who think I'm crazy or that a ghost lives in my basement. This was years ago while I was in high school. I was playing video games alone in my basement, with the Xbox playing through the TV. I had lost the TV remote a while back, so I had to adjust the volume by pressing the buttons on the side of the TV. The audio played from the I had to stand up and watch my TV to adjust the volume. One time, while I was alone, I took my earbuds off and placed them along with my controller down onto the couch next to me and went to the TV to adjust the volume. It took me like 3 seconds to slightly adjust the volume, and when I turned around, the earbuds were unplugged from the controller and vanished. Naturally, I look underneath the couch
Sorted
and
application.
the cushions.
Red alert, traders. We've spotted a harvester in your area. A queen is guarding it with her life. Only engage if you've brought your best gear, lots of backup, and a very good
There's no
plan.
way that someone came downstairs and took them, as the only way down was right next to the TV, and I would have seen them in my peripheral vision when I'm walking down. I asked my family just in case if they did anything with them. Of course, they all said no. I decided to give it a rest, and just assumed they would turn up sooner or later, which is kind of what they did, but in a creepy way. The next few days, I went back and forth to the basement, and I took apart the couch and cut into the fabric underneath to see if it was deeper in the couch. Nothing. I couldn't find it anywhere. After looking everywhere else, I gave up once again and put the couch back together and decided to just get into the reasons. I swear, 2 weeks later, I go down to the basement and the earbuds are sitting on the exact part of the couch that I left. I immediately go ask my family why they were messing with me, and they swear they didn't do anything. This time they were not plugged into the controller. They were just sitting on the couch. This seemed so strange to me and everyone I told it to. It was like the earbuds were taken to another dimension, just brought right back. I did a Google search about similar phenomena, and I learned that it's a common trait among poltergeist folklore that they will vanish objects and make them reappear at a later time. sometimes in the same spot, sometimes in another location. The only other thing that happened in this house similar to this was a thing with my brother where his wallet went missing and was found in the top shelf of his closet, even though he didn't put it there. But you'd have to ask him about that. First, I will explain the layout of the second floor. My room is right across from my parents'. Adjacent to my room is the guest room, which normally is staying room. In the middle of the hallway between my parents' room and mine is the bathroom. One night, my dad started hearing creaking, as if someone was walking in the hallway. The floors are extremely creaky. He heard the footsteps slowly approaching his door. Thinking I would knock on the door to ask for something, I waited for my knock. About 5 minutes passed, but he didn't hear the footsteps leaving from outside his door. Wondering why I was so confused, he woke up my mom and opened the door to check who it was. Surprisingly, no one was there. He didn't know what the sleep happened. He checked. Opening my bedroom door, he found me dead asleep. I've been stuck in my head for a while. Ever since my parents told me about this, I've never been able to get it off my mind. Sure, maybe you can chalk it up to the house being old. It was built in 1988. I'm not sure if that's extremely old for houses. Thanks for letting me get this off my
Hey,
chest.
hello!
Hey, people.
Yes!
I'm not the kind of person who likes to talk about things that can't be explained. Growing up on the Pine Ridge Reservation, you learn to keep your mouth shut about certain subjects. And sometimes something happens that gets under your skin, something so real and so terrifying that you can't stay quiet any longer. What I'm about to tell you happened in the summer of 1984, and it's something I've tried my best to forget. But it keeps coming back like a bad dream that just won't go away. My name is Jaden Whiteflower. I was 19 years old that summer, and like many people my age, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I spent most of my days helping my Uncle Isaac, who worked as a ranger at Custer State Park in South Dakota. It was a good job, better than most, and it kept me out of trouble. But that summer was different. That was the summer when something happened that would change the way I saw the world forever. It was late July, and the weather was hot and dry. The park was busy, full of tourists and campers trying to escape the heat by getting out into nature. Uncle Isaac and I were making our rounds, checking the campsites and making sure everything was in order, when we got a call on the radio. There had been a report of a group of campers who had checked in, and no one had seen them since the beginning. They were supposed to have left that night, but their car was still parked in the truck. Isaac was a serious man. I could tell he was worried. Better go check it out, he said. We headed on to the trail and some campers and glasses. The trail was one of the last places, leading into the woods, away from the main campsite. It was rugged, and not the kind of place you go if you're not looking for a real adventure. I remember the sun was starting to set as we made our way down the path. The shadows stretched out long and long across the ground. It didn't take us long to find the campsite. The tents were still there, set up and ready, but there was no sign of the campers. At first, it just looked like they'd gone off for a hike, hadn't made it back yet, but something felt off. The air was heavy, and it felt like the air was taking its breath, waiting for something to happen. It started looking back at the hallway. That's when I noticed it. The fire pit. It was cold, like it hadn't been used in hours, maybe even longer. There were pots of it scattered around, and it was looking like something warm. And then I saw footprints moving in the tracks. They were deep, like someone had been running, but there was something strange about them. They didn't look right. His face was grim, and I could see he was thinking the same thing I was. Let's follow them, he said. But stay close, and keep your eyes open. We followed the tracks deeper into the woods. things closed in mountains, I started to get the feeling that we weren't alone. I could hear something moving in the brush, something that wasn't us. Every now and then, I'd catch a glimpse of movement out of the corner. It was the first body. It was Nick, sitting towards the tree, his eyes wide open, staring up at the sky. There was no blood, no sign of struggle on
Let's
his
move to
face.
that location.
I'll never forget the look on his face. It was like he'd seen something so terrible that it had killed him on the spot. I felt sick. I said, "Listen, you need to keep going," he said. He was steady. I went. On the others fought gathered through the trees. There were 4 of them, and they were all the same. Dead, with no visible injuries, their faces twisted in terror. I wanted to run to get out of there and pretend I'd never seen them. I took a deep breath. "We need to report this," he said, his voice low. "But there's something else we have to do first." I didn't understand what he meant, but I followed him as he led me through the We walked in silence when I felt the ground until it came to a split. In the center of the room was a circle of stones. The circle was something. I don't know how to describe it, but it looked like a twisted black figure, half-buried in the dirt. It was small, about the size of a child. "What is that?" I asked. I was barely listening. Isaac didn't answer right. He just stared at it in his face. "It's a second planet. Something that should be. I didn't understand. I'd never seen this before. "What do we do?" I asked. "We have to leave it alone," he said, his voice shaking. "And we have to get out of here. Now." We ran back to the campsite. By the time we got there, it was dark. Uncle Isaac called it in. The team was sent out to recover the bodies. I never felt the feeling of fear. I felt feeling. He told me this. None seemed to understand. He said it was probably an attack.
Primary power is back, so we're at least at half grid. And one of our operators spotted the injured engineer crawling into one of our hatches.
His job is moved off the reservation, far away from the
Head home at the east elevator.
I stayed, but I've never been able to get out. Over the years, I've heard so much. People disappearing, strange sightings on the roads, whispering from the ship. And every time I hear it, there's something. I don't know what it was. I know it wasn't me. So if you ever find yourself in the woods, you start to feel like you're being watched, like there's something just outside. Listen to your instincts. Get out of there. Because there are things in this world that will never be found. If you're not careful, you might just end up like those campers in 1984 instead of seeing. No one will ever know what really happened. In my city, there are 2 people who look exactly alike. I have carefully compared the photographs. They look like the same person. There's literally no difference in appearance other than that the older individual has somewhat darker skin than the younger one. And even that could change with increased sun exposure. One of these individuals was a student at my elementary school, and the other was the mother of a homeschooled student I had associated with. I met the latter less than 2 years after leaving the school, so I knew them both the first times when one was an adult and the other was a child. Their husbands also looked like the same person, and even had the same occupation. We did research and found that they live in houses that are carbon copies of each other, built in the same year, and within 5 minutes driving distance and 30 minutes walking distance in a secluded rural area. This seems to me to be an example of the doppelganger phenomenon. I think there must be something apparent. And I changed my post to correct a bizarre sentence that looked like a borderline word salad. The previously said, one of the 2 characters was a student at my elementary school. The other was a mother of a homeschooling associate that I had. I changed it to, One of the two characters was a student at my elementary school. The other was another, a homeschool student that I had associated with. After hearing story after story of strange encounters with strange men dressed in black suits, I wanted to tell a story from my childhood that, to this day, I am unable to explain. This took place in
Ready, Ryder, friendly.
It was summer. I was on a field trip with my
Hello, buddy.
Hello there.
We were at the New York State Museum
Hello
in
there.
Albany, New York.
The elevator.
I was in a group with maybe 2 or 3 other kids, one of the daycare workers for a chaperone.
Here, Raider. Come here.
We got there in the morning. We're told we could roam around the museum with our group until either 12 or 1 and had to get back up with everyone for lunch on the 3rd floor.
Yes.
Our group walked around, looking at all the exhibits, and after a while, we realized we had lost track of the way. We only had a few minutes to get up to the 3rd floor to finish the attendance. We were on the other side. We hurried quickly to the floor. On the left, we stood at the my chaplain said we had made it in time, and that we still had a minute or so to spare. Then, as the doors were closing, extremely well-dressed man,
Thanks.
he was wearing black shoes, black suit, black he was carrying a black necklace. At the time, I thought nothing of it, but I've always looked back at this and thought this was very odd, as it was summer, and he was dressed for the dead of winter. As the man got on, I noticed that he kept his head down, almost as though he didn't want to see his face.
Can I help you?
He quickly turned
There you
around
are.
and looked at me
Thank
with his
you.
head.
That is a
He
huge
just stood
load off
there
my
with his
mind.
back to us.
The engineer managed to get back here, injured but alive.
The
They're
elevator
currently
doors
being patched up down in the clinic.
My usual engineer is still healing from his wounds and has been loopy. Watch your back when you're in the power generation complex. I don't want my backup engineer bedridden as well.
The elevator's display showed we had arrived at the 3rd floor, but the elevator didn't stop. The numbers just kept climbing, and we were definitely still moving. I want to preface this by saying those elevators in the lobby only have access to 4 floors. To my knowledge, the museum only has 4 above-ground floors. I'll talk more about that at the end. At this point, it had been well over a minute since the elevator started moving, and the numbers on the display continued to climb, as did the elevator. That eerie feeling that had been seemingly emanating from this man was getting more intense. The air in the elevator was beginning to get extremely heavy. It seemed to get more and more noticeable as we continued to go up. The higher the elevator climbed, the feeling turned from eerie to foreboding. I remember getting the feeling you get in the pit of your stomach when you know something bad is going to happen. And something definitely wasn't right. The display was saying we had passed the 50th floor and we were still climbing. At this point, it had been around 5 minutes in the elevator. The atmosphere in the elevator had gotten almost unbearable. This heavy, ominous feeling was something I've never experienced since. The closest thing I can compare it to is that feeling you get when you walk down a dark hallway after watching a horror movie, and even that doesn't begin to describe this. Suddenly, the elevator stops. There's a sudden shift in the atmosphere of the elevator. It went from this foreboding feeling to a feeling of impending doom. Then I remember almost panicking when I thought about what was on the other side of those doors. I was telling myself over and over again that the buttons on the elevator don't go past the 4th floor. So there aren't any floors beyond that. So whatever on the other side of those doors can't possibly exist. This whole experience can't possibly have happened. And when the doors open, I'll see all my friends from the other groups eating lunch and everything will be okay. But that's not what happened. And this is where things have always gotten fuzzy for me. I remember getting on the elevator with my group, the man walking in, and the elevator going up. But I can't remember my group being in the elevator after a certain point. I know it was at least 5 minutes from the time we entered the elevator before it stopped, and yet I can't tell you how much time passed between when the elevator stopped and when the doors opened. I can remember looking at the display to see what floor we were on, but can't remember what it said. I remember being frozen there, with no sound or movement whatsoever. I remember feeling like if those doors opened, something bad was going to happen. to the point where I remember panicking inside my head, pretending that none of this wasn't happening. But every time I opened my eyes, that sinister man was still standing there, as still as a statue. And then all of a sudden, the man who was responsible for all of this, who had not moved a single muscle since the elevator doors closed, drops his briefcase. Not even a second after the briefcase hit the ground, the doors of the elevator opened. And yet I can't remember what was beyond those doors. I have tried for the last 18 years to remember, and have never been able to see it. I just remember it being white and bright. The man then calmly picked up his
That shit's almost instant,
back
babe.
fedora, almost as to bid us goodbye, and walked off the elevator. I then remember the doors closing, and that ominous feeling is gone. And in an instant, we were on the third floor, and the doors popped open. Only then do I remember seeing the rest of my group on the elevator. All of them looked as terrified as I did, especially our chaperone. Looking out, I saw the rest of the kids and chaperones from the other groups. We walked out of the elevator and had been expecting to be extremely late for lunch, but we had made it on time. This is impossible because we had initially reached the elevator a minute or so before lunch started. That encounter on the elevator had lasted at least 5 or 10 minutes. I remember our chaperone pulling the other adults aside, and I assumed told them what had happened to us on that elevator. I remember sitting at the table with my friends eating a pizza at lunch, and the kids from my group, and I sharing the story of what had just happened. No one believing us. I remember the chaperone I had avoided the subject for the rest of the day, and the other kids in my group seemed to have dropped it as well. I remember that I told my mom what had happened, and I've always felt as though she didn't believe me. But before writing this, I wanted to make sure that really did happen since I was so young, and it had been well over a decade since this happened, and that it wasn't something my mind made up over the years, or maybe just a very vivid dream. So I asked my mom if she remembered me telling her about this, and she said she did. She remembers picking me up from the community center, and the second we got into the car, I had told her all about the man in black, and the elevator going up all these floors, and even that he had dropped his briefcase. She said she also remembers me telling her that he had said something to me, though she doesn't remember what, and I don't have any memory of him saying anything. So here is my story. 18 years later, I still have absolutely no clue who that man was, where the elevator took us, what was beyond the doors where the man walked off, or anything that happened in that elevator. I just know that it happened. I have no idea how long we were in that elevator. It could have been minutes or even hours. But what I do know is that time seems to have been separate from our reality, since no time had actually passed when we got to the third floor. Hopefully you have heard something similar, or at least have an idea of what happened. I've gone through every explanation I can think of, and none of them make sense. From not remembering correctly what elevator we got on, and perhaps getting in one somewhere else. But that's impossible for reasons I've listed in the paragraph below this. I thought maybe it was a really vivid dream, but my mom remembers me telling her right after picking me up from daycare, today at the field trip. I've even considered a gas leak in the elevator causing us to hallucinate. The one thought that's always been in the back of my mind has been that we got onto the elevator and took a ride through another dimension. Just a little side note, I had a job with a catering company in the Albany area last summer, and one of the most common venues we catered at was the New York State Museum. Over that summer, I rode probably every public elevator in that building, and even a cargo elevator they had. Not a single one I rode on had any buttons beyond the fourth floor. Original commentary for the internet. What have we learned from this story? The main point of this narrative is the subversion of the monster archetype, shifting the role of the antagonist from cryptic and known natural terror. We are assuming that a massive, unknown humanoid would be inherently hostile, with evidence. The creature's gentle handling of the narrative, the vision of truth, and the protective symbols of activity suggests a highly empathetic and intelligent social structure. How do you know this is true? We rely on the narrative's detailed observation of Clear's historical gatherings, which documents a long-standing, sometimes cooperative relationship between the two. Another way to look at this is as a psychological study of grief and death. The narrator is only alive because of the dual sacrifice of the dog, Scamp, and the mercy of the monster. The consequences are a lifelong burden of secrecy and a radical shift into a world regarding human dominance of the water, while the emotional resonance, a scar on her shoulder provides personal weight. The lack of external verification of common such isolated incidents makes it difficult to categorize as objective fact. Ultimately, given the highly cinematic nature of the rescue and the perfectly preserved cave gallery, I believe this story is fiction, acting as a powerful piece of contemporary folklore that explores kindness across species backgrounds. Thanks for sticking with us to the end of this one. We're building something unique here, and your intel is a huge part of that. Now, I want to hear from you. What's your take on this encounter? Was it a tactical error, or something from the shadows that we just aren't equipped to handle? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I personally agree the majority of what you guys post, and your theories are what keep this channel moving forward. If you haven't already, join the community by hitting that subscribe button and ring the bell. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and I'll see you tomorrow. It's pretty safe at this stage. Once it gets moved, it's to the runway. It's off a legendary government. That's not it. Now we'll protect it with our all-inclusive 3-lifetime warranty. It doesn't cost a dime. There's no fine print. It even covers the center stone.
It's 1947. A couple of sightseeing in Crater Lake National Park. When inexplicably, the man rushes to the edge of a cliff.
She sees that he's looking out at the water in kind of in a trance-like state.
The man continues staring at the lake when suddenly, this is Mysteries at the National Parks. Crater Lake National Park, located in southern Oregon. It's 286 square miles of old-growth forest and lush meadows surround one of the most beautiful and pristine lakes in the world. Formed by a violent volcanic eruption nearly 8,000 years ago, the lake is the deepest in the United States, nearly 2,000 feet to the mysterious ice-cold bottom. For some, this awe-inspiring landscape is also home to inexplicable forces and mysterious entities, known to lure unsuspecting visitors to their doom. July 1947. A couple is sightseeing in Crater Lake National Park. They are making their way through a lush evergreen forest along the rim of the lake.
It's a beautiful day. They're walking hand in hand. They're having to stop for a moment because it's a hard hike.
Exhausted, the husband stops to catch his breath and takes a sip of water.
It's the biggest mountain in the state of Oregon, but it doesn't really look like it. So it's kind of easy to underestimate it, and many people have.
Despite the man's increasing fatigue, he and his wife continue their upward journey. They follow the trail to the summit, when inexplicably, the man gets a sudden burst of energy. He leaves his wife and races towards the rim of the crater.
He's not out of breath anymore. And he gets into a spot by the edge of the lake, and as she catches up to him, she sees that he's kind of looking out at the water, and kind of in a trance-like state.
The man stands dangerously close to the edge of a cliff, which towers 1,000 feet above the surface of the icy water. Frightened by his odd behavior, his wife talks with him, trying to get him away from the edge.
And she comes up to him, maybe feeling a little bit nervous about what is going on because this isn't like him.
Without saying a word, he hands her his wallet. Then, without warning, he plunges to the rocks below.
She's looking down. There he is at the bottom. He looks like he's actually okay.
Miraculously, the man slowly gets up and continues moving.
He's hobbling, but he's hobbling towards the water instead of towards her.
His wife helplessly watches in horror as he enters the frigid water and doesn't stop.
He was determined to kill himself here and now. And no one could figure out why. He didn't seem to be mentally deranged.
What can explain the man's strange behavior and why he suddenly jumped off the rim of the crater and drowned himself? Stories of inexplicable deadly events have plagued Crater Lake National Park for centuries.
Certainly a lot of strange things happen here that statistically seem to cry out for some sort of explanation. Lots of accidents, suicides, seemingly more than you would think would happen in a place this size.
This national park is one of the most beautiful and remote wilderness areas in Oregon. But its deadly reputation causes many to stay away.
Many people think that it's a bit of a dangerous place. There are people who are actually kind of afraid of it. Many people actually do think that there is something supernatural going on here.
What could possibly explain the presence of a mysterious, deadly force in Crater Lake National Park? Some believe the answer may be connected with the cold, deep blue waters of the lake itself. 1997. Brad Olson and a friend hiked to the summit of Hellman Peak. Rising over 8,100 feet, it is the highest point along the rim of the 6-mile-wide caldera.
We look down at the lake. There's the beautiful deep blue Crater Lake with Wizard Island.
The young men are awestruck by the spectacular view. Then, all of a sudden, they notice a brilliant shaft of light reflecting off of the lake's surface.
We slowly look up and we saw this perfectly white streak of light, like a laser beam, but there was no beginning and there was no end.
Inexplicably, the light changes direction.
It was so fascinating and so amazing. It just broke off into these perfect square blips as it descended into the depth of Crater Lake.
Just as the light is about to hit the lake's surface, it suddenly disappears.
What I thought it was at the time could have been like a military weapons test, although why would it start and stop? Obviously, this was some kind of paranormal experience up here. The experience really solidified in my mind that there is more to Crater Lake than we're being told. And I'm still searching for the answers.
What can explain this mysterious light? Does the lake's spellbinding surface secretly harbor a malevolent force? October 1976. A park ranger in Crater Lake National Park makes a gruesome discovery.
The genes were laid out inside, most of the bones had disappeared, and the skull was not there. It was as though it melted into the pumice.
Crater Lake National Park in southwestern Oregon, a place of contrasting vistas, from the silent majesty of its hemlock and pine forests to its tranquil meadows. But some claim the park also has a dark side, which is responsible for many inexplicable deaths. What can be behind these disturbing events? Some believe the answer could be connected to the park's stunning lake and its mesmerizing surface. October 1976. Two young men hike in a remote area of the park.
They were up. That's the trail that goes all the way from Mexico to Canada.
Their journey is interrupted when the hikers spot a backpack off the main path. Concerned they may have stumbled upon the scene of an accident, they notify authorities.
It was a trail that was not well used by people, so they brought the backpack back to park headquarters.
The next day, a park ranger goes to investigate, looking for evidence of a lost hiker.
The ranger arrives where the backpack was found, and going down away from there, he went down into a swale.
The ranger's search takes him far off the trail and into a remote area of the park. In the middle of nowhere, he makes an odd discovery. A pair of men's jeans lying nearby on the ground.
They were oddly placed in the sense that they were still stretched out, the fly had been unzipped, the boots were gone, which is really strange.
The ranger inspects the jeans and is shocked by what he finds.
The jeans had bones in them, toe bones, but most of the major bones were gone. And the skull was not there. The rest of the body was missing. It was as though he'd melted into the pumice.
Shaken by his discovery, the ranger scours the area for more clues.
Searching around further, he then found, about 12 feet away, the cap of the skull, but the rest of the skull was missing.
The FBI launches an investigation and determines the bones and pants belong to a 19-year-old amateur photographer from Virginia who disappeared in a snowstorm a year and a half earlier.
He had come to Crater Lake looking for opportunities to take pictures of Crater Lake during the wintertime. Of course, it was impossible to get through all the snow that had fallen over the past couple of months, and that's where his family lost contact with him.
But there is a mystery. The human remains are found 12 miles from where the man was taking pictures, along the rim of Crater Lake. And a powerful snowstorm hit the day he went missing, burying the area under 4 feet of snow. How did his body end up here, so far from where he was last seen alive? Some theorize he may have been dragged the 12 miles by wild animals. But former park ranger Larry Smith disagrees.
The big animals leave the park in the wintertime because there's nothing up there to eat.
Wonder Tree? Is my name. Are you Doc, are you hiding from used car shopping? Maybe. I'm always here to show me car faults. Perfect. You showed up there. That's right. See you. Don't get overpaid. Always look for me and shit.
Don't just take a vacation. Escape with a Vacasa vacation rental. From mountains to sea, our spotless land.
Others speculate that maybe he walked that far. But after you walk 2 or 3 feet and realize that you're sinking down over your knees, you're going to turn around and go back just because of pure exhaustion.
Despite the FBI investigation, the man's disappearance and death remain a total mystery to this day.
In all my years involved with these type of things, it's one of the strangest things how a 19-year-old boy without snowshoes, without skis, was able to go 12 miles into the most remote part of the park.
This is not the first photographer to have perished while trying to capture the beauty of Crater Lake. In February 1911, noted photographer B.B. Bukowski also disappeared.
He was determined to become the first person to actually get a winter photograph of the lake, and he never came back that winter. And so they searched for him. And they found his camera set up, they found his tent, but he's never been found.
Some believe the disappearance of photographers suggests the presence of a malevolent force in Crater Lake National Park. If true, where does this force come from? A park ranger's haunting encounter may provide a clue to this disturbing mystery.
I can see people walking, circling around the fire. I'm looking down, trying to make sure I don't fall, and I look up, and there's nothing there.